Hey, Mike here, and welcome to Mike Talks, mini Mike Talks. These are talks that enable a thriving posture in the workplace. We're going to do a 4-part series, and we're going to anchor it on a story and a quote. Here's the story. It's an ancient story. If you want life, if you really want to get this thing, if you want to live wholeheartedly, you need to be the person who finds treasure in the field and who, upon finding it, gets rid of the rest with joy. How about that? Rather random, hey? But that story has been so transformative to me. But let's couple it with a quote, a really good quote. Life is pure adventure, and the sooner we realize this, the quicker we can treat life as art. Angelou. Testing 1, 2. Welcome to part 2. Last time we spoke about the mindset of the adventurer. Today we're going to look at the action of the adventurer. So, every day people plan to do difficult things, but they don't do them. What's quite interesting about the quote by Angelou is that the mindset of the adventurer leads to creation. In other words, mindset leads to doing. Mindset is like the settings on our cell phone, smartphone. But it's only useful if it actually begins to enable the doing. What's very interesting about the parable is the treasure's hidden. This is an interesting question. Why is it hidden? The fact that it's hidden means you've got to go and do some digging. You've got to get a little bit dirty. So mindset's one thing, but mindset should lead us to creation, should lead us to getting a little bit dirty. Now, one of the big problems that we face as human beings is that we have got a preference, and I'm being kind here, we've got a preference for easy. We tend to find a way to solve a problem and then we refine it, and we just keep doing that. And I know I'm being quite harsh on us as human beings, but the science definitely shows that we are wired for the path of least resistance. And over a period of time, we begin to not even realize that non-conscious, subconscious behavior is directing us. And until we make that noticeable, it's going to keep doing it, and we'll probably call it fate. That's always the danger that we face. So we've got to try and break the easy. We've got to start creating. We've got to start digging. Adam Grant, who I mentioned in the previous episode, says this: most often we opt to fit in. As human beings, we choose to be part of the crowd, and instead of taking a risk to be original, we just superficially appear to be being original. And how do we break that? Because the adventurer not only has a mindset but begins to dig. Matthew McConaughey, in his book Green Light, says something quite interesting. He says he learned as an early actor that people often have an opinion, but the opinion is very unfounded. They haven't done the work. So people would say something like this: oh, that's a terrible movie. But he would then ask them, so what part of the movie didn't you enjoy? Only to discover that they haven't even watched the movie. They're making that judgment based on their opinion of an actor. Think about it. How often do you and I have an opinion, but it's actually very, very unfounded? We haven't done the digging. We haven't done the work. So here's another thought. We long for eternal youth. All of us long to be eternally young, or so I think. But how interesting that we live for 12 days of the year, and we wish away 5 days of the week. The 12 days is when we maybe get the reward of pay. The other 29, 30 days are wished away. Can't wait for payday. Or think about this one. Hey, it's Friday. By the way, today is Friday. And Friday is exciting because now we can live. So part of that challenge within us as human beings is to not be using the other 5 days, not be using the other 29 days. Now let's go to two powerful quotes. Seth Godin is one of my favorite writers, and he says this: if it were easy, it would be easy for everybody. That would make it very, very difficult to do work that stands out, to do work that people go out their way to find. Yeah? When hard times appear, that's actually very, very good news because it separates you from those who are not as committed. All right? So hard part. Do we ever think about the hard part as the valuable part? This is what makes it matters. Think about the comrades. If it were easy to run from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, we wouldn't have it on television. And we wouldn't say to a comrades runner, wow, how good was that? It's the hard part that makes it valuable. Now let's go to Liz Gilbert and let's get to Maya Angelou, where she talks about creativity. Liz Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, she says this: creativity in itself does not care about the results. The only thing creativity craves is the process. Learn to love the process and let what happens next happen without fussing too much about it. Work like a monk, work like a mule, or any other representative metaphor for diligence, she says, but love the work. So what I find in this is that we as human beings are often outcome focused, but the joy is in the dirt that is here now, the digging. Now what we're talking about here is what some have termed a growth mindset. Carol Dweck wrote a beautiful book called Mindsets. And this is something that I've had to learn over the years, is growth mindset sees challenge, sees the hard part, sees effort as part of the process of learning. Many times in my life, I've made the mistake where I've said something like this: if I have to dig, obviously it's not meant to be. If I have to work at this, well, obviously I don't have talent or I don't have the skill. So what do? I choose the easy path, just things that come more naturally. Jackson Pollock was one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. But you know that when he was 7 years old, he was told, his parents were told that he doesn't have a creative bone within him. But he did the hard work. Mozart, a prodigy of music, as talented as he was, he would practice till he couldn't move his hands. He engaged in the dig. He engaged in the creative work. We need the mindset, but we need to also have the doing, the action, where we get dirty. So should we go back to Sally and Joe, the two people I introduced you to last time? So let's go to Sally. Sally finishes the meeting. She's been engaging her staff on a new direction, on a vision, on pictures of possibility. But as she finishes the meeting, she gets this sunken feeling. Her team haven't bought into the ideas. They're indifferent. They're not asking questions. They're looking at her in a vague way. She thinks to herself, I need to take this deeper. She puts aside her notes and she begins to inquire. She begins to try and understand what their concerns are. She begins to get them to share their ideas. She begins to engage the difficulties that they are saying. And she finds that as she does, she begins to see some of her blind spots. But as she does, she also begins to help them create a new story within. After about 2 hours, the room is tired, but it's abuzz with excitement. Some creativity has started. Some treasure has been found. How different to Joe, who's next door with his team. And Joe's upset because his team dared ask a question, a challenging question. Joe thinks to himself as he walks out, what a bunch of idiots. They know nothing. Yeah? Have you ever been Joe? Have you ever been Sally? Sally prepared to engage the struggle. Joe just making a quick interpretation that dismisses. So how do we move into the action of the adventure? Well, first thing, a real encouragement, is try and introduce into your day a pause and act session. I find I do this when I'm drinking a cup of coffee. I try and pause and I try and notice what's going on. But then more importantly, I'm also asking this question, Mike, what do you need to do? What's the next best thing to do here? Remember, what I'm trying to break is just this same path through the field. Introduce a pause and act. Secondly, a great question that takes us into the action of the adventure is this one. how do I know that I am right? Whoa, that's a brave question, isn't it? How do I know that I am right? When I have a conviction about something, I might tend to not listen to anything else. Mike, how do I know that I'm right? That's what Sally did. How do I know that I'm right? Let's dig. Joe just assumes that he's right. Third thing, remember, action is always about ship. Steve Jobs famously said, real artists ship. So ship the idea. Speak up in the meeting. Ship the CV if you need to. Publish the work. Don't wait for perfection. We've got to be doing. We can't forever be waiting. And then the last thing which really helps me in this space is who's your model? Remember, we rise to the strength of the person who is the model. One of my models when it comes to this area is definitely Richard Branson, who not only is a great visionary, but the many stories I know of him is vision and act. So let's end off this little part 2, going back to a bit of Madiba magic. Nelson Mandela said this, I've learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not fear, but he who conquers it. Yeah? Fear, perfection, stop us from digging. The best way to conquer the fear is to just get dirty.